Most women trying to lose weight are doing two things at the same time, eating less and exercising more. They have been told in every form and format that diet culture can produce that this is the formula. Reduce calories, increase movement. The body responds. The weight comes off. But what most of those women are never told is that the ratio of what they eat matters as much as the amount, and that the specific combination of macronutrients on their plate, not just the size of the deficit, determines whether what comes off is fat, muscle, or some combination of both that leaves them lighter but not actually leaner. Well, a recent study published in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism tested this directly, not with a small group over a few weeks, but with 161 sedentary obese women across 14 weeks, 6 different diet and exercise combinations running simultaneously, measured against each other at the same time with the same exercise program running underneath all of them. The question they were trying to answer was specific and had not been properly tested at this scale before. When it comes to losing belly fat specifically, does what you eat matter as much as how much you eat? The answer was not ambiguous. The 161 women who participated were all sedentary, all obese, all premenopausal, with an average age of 38 years. None of them were already exercising or participating in any other weight loss program when the study began. They were assigned to one of 6 groups: a control group with no diet and no exercise, an exercise-only group with no dietary changes, and 4 groups that combined a structured exercise program with 4 distinctly different dietary approaches. The exercise component was identical across all exercising groups. Every woman in those groups performed a supervised circuit resistance training program 3 times per week for the full 14 weeks. The exercise was controlled, consistent, and the same for everyone. The only variable that changed between groups was what they were eating. The 4 dietary interventions were designed to test what happens when you shift the ratio of carbohydrates to protein while keeping women in a caloric deficit. The approaches ranged from a very low carbohydrate, high protein diet at 1,200 calories to a low carbohydrate, moderate protein diet, to a high carbohydrate, low protein diet, to a high energy, high carbohydrate diet at 2,600 calories that was not designed for weight loss at all. The researchers wanted to know not just whether cutting calories worked, but whether the macronutrient composition of those calories produced measurably different outcomes in the same women doing the same exercise. 14 weeks later, the results drew a clear line between the groups, and the line was not where most conventional diet advice would have predicted it to fall. Every group that exercised, regardless of dietary approach, experienced significant reductions in waist circumference. The exercise alone produced measurable changes in abdominal size, even without dietary changes. But when the researchers looked at actual fat loss, not just weight loss, not just inches off the waist, but the specific reduction in body fat mass measured through DXA scanning, the picture changed. Fat loss after 14 weeks was significantly greatest in the very low carbohydrate, high protein group, followed by the low carbohydrate, moderate protein group, and then the high carbohydrate, low protein group. The women eating the fewest carbohydrates and the most protein lost the most fat. The women eating the most carbohydrates and the least protein lost considerably less fat, even though all groups were exercising with the same program. The very low carbohydrate, high protein group lost an average of between 3.2 and 5.2 kilograms of fat over 14 weeks. The groups eating more carbohydrates and less protein lost significantly less. The women who exercised with no dietary changes lost the least fat of all exercising groups, confirming what the researchers expected, that exercise alone, without addressing what you eat, produces minimal fat loss outcomes. Greater improvements in waist circumference and body composition occurred when carbohydrate is replaced in the diet with protein. That was the study's central conclusion, stated directly. There is a biological reason why this happened, and it is connected to the same insulin mechanism that the Harvard menopause diet study documented. When women eat carbohydrates, particularly refined carbohydrates, blood sugar rises and the body releases insulin to manage it. Insulin is a storage hormone. Its job is to direct nutrients into cells, and in the presence of excess carbohydrates, it directs glucose into fat storage rather than energy use. A high-carbohydrate diet, even one that is calorie-restricted, produces repeated insulin spikes throughout the day, and each of those spikes is a signal to the body to store rather than burn. A high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet works differently in several specific ways. Protein has a significantly higher thermic effect than carbohydrate or fat, meaning the body burns more calories simply digesting it. Protein is also highly satiating, reducing hunger signals more effectively than equivalent calories from carbohydrate. And, critically, a lower carbohydrate intake produces smaller and less frequent insulin spikes, shifting the metabolic environment away from fat storage and toward fat burning. The women eating more protein and fewer carbohydrates were not just eating less food. They were eating food that their bodies processed differently. Food that kept insulin lower, kept hunger more manageable, kept energy expenditure higher, and allowed the exercise they were doing to actually translate into fat loss rather than just weight loss. Now, I want to pause on that last point because it is the one that matters most for you. The protein did not just help these women eat less. It changed what their bodies did with the food. It kept their insulin low, kept their hunger in check. And it is the reason the exact same exercise turned into fat loss instead of just weight loss. And here's the part the study quietly points to. The insulin mechanism behind all of this is the same one that gets worse after menopause, not better. So if protein-forward eating made this kind of difference in premenopausal women, the principle does not weaken for a menopausal body. It matters even more. But here's the honest gap. This study did not just tell these women to eat more protein. It handed them a structured, calculated plan with a team supervising every meal. In real life, you are handed the conclusion and left to build the meals yourself. And that is exactly where almost everyone stalls. Knowing protein beats refined carbs is easy. Turning that into breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day without a research team in your kitchen is the hard part. That's exactly why we created the Menopause Protein Bundle. It takes the principle this study just proved, more protein, fewer refined carbs, food that keeps your insulin low and your hunger steady, and turns it into done-for-you meals built for a menopausal body. Breakfasts, lunches, and dinners designed around protein, ready in about 10 minutes with nothing to track and nothing to count. And yes, even desserts and smoothies that satisfy a craving without the carb-driven insulin spike this study is warning you about. You just open it and cook. So please check out the link in the description because this could be the moment your effort finally starts producing fat loss instead of just a smaller number on the scale. The moment the work you are already doing actually changes your body the way it was always supposed to. There is something else in this study worth understanding because it directly addresses one of the most persistent fears women carry about changing their diet, the fear of losing muscle. In the groups that lost the most fat, the weight that came off was primarily fat mass. The DXA scans confirmed it. The women losing the most body fat were not losing proportional amounts of muscle. They were losing fat specifically, which is precisely what most women want when they talk about wanting to lose weight, but actually mean they want to lose belly fat and look different in their body. The exercise component of the study is part of the reason for this. Resistance training specifically signals the body to preserve muscle even during a caloric deficit. When combined with adequate protein intake, which the high-protein groups were receiving, that muscle preservation signal is amplified. The women eating the most protein and doing resistance training 3 times per week were creating the conditions where the body had both a reason to preserve muscle and the nutritional raw material to do so. This matters because the standard advice most women receive about weight loss, eat less, do more cardio, creates exactly the wrong conditions for this outcome. A large caloric deficit without adequate protein and without resistance training tends to produce weight loss that includes a significant proportion of muscle, slowing metabolism and making the body composition outcome worse, even as the number on the scale goes down. The study also found that exercise alone appears to have minimal impact on measured fat loss outcomes, with positive outcomes only apparent when exercise is combined with a dietary approach that creates a caloric deficit. The exercise-only group, who trained 3 times per week for 14 weeks without changing what they ate, showed the smallest changes in fat mass of any exercising group. This is consistent with what other research has shown and what most people intuitively know but find difficult to act on. Exercise is essential for health, for fitness, for muscle development, for cardiovascular function, and for a long list of outcomes that matter beyond weight. But as a standalone fat loss tool, without addressing diet, its effect is limited. The women in this study who exercised without changing what they ate did see waist circumference improvements, but their fat loss was minimal compared to every group that combined exercise with a dietary change. The implication is not that exercise is unimportant, it is that exercise and diet are not interchangeable tools doing the same job. They are different tools doing different jobs that work best when used together. And when diet is doing the job of creating the conditions for fat loss, the composition of that diet matters as much as the size of the deficit it creates. Now, there are limitations to this study worth naming honestly. The participants were all premenopausal women, which means the findings speak directly to the mechanisms at work in younger and middle-aged women, but the specific hormonal dynamics of the postmenopausal environment were not what was being studied here. The study ran for 14 weeks, a meaningful duration, but not a lifetime, and the longer-term sustainability of very low-carbohydrate eating patterns is a separate question that this study was not designed to answer. What the study was designed to answer, and did answer clearly, is whether macronutrient composition matters for fat loss in women who are exercising and eating in a deficit. The answer is yes. The composition of the diet produced measurably different fat loss outcomes, even when the exercise program was identical and all groups were eating less than they needed to maintain weight. What this means practically is something most women have never been told in those exact terms. A calorie deficit matters, but a calorie deficit built around protein and lower carbohydrates loses significantly more fat than a calorie deficit built around carbohydrates and minimal protein, in the same women doing the same exercise over the same period of time. The women who lost the most belly fat in the study were not the ones who restricted the most. They were the ones who shifted what they were eating, less refined carbohydrate, more protein, while keeping their exercise consistent and their deficit in place.